This comes from the end of part one of your two articles, which again I said we'll share in the show notes. But the first major breakthrough for me on my journey from Bernie to Bitcoin was confronting the idea of trust in politics and wondering how Bitcoin's trustlessness could be leveraged towards a positive political end via its potential to constrain lawmakers. So I've read that quote now probably about 10 times this morning. I'm going over and over and over it in my head. And then I went back and read your analogy with doctors and cures. And then it started to resonate with me. And because Danny was saying, oh, you're really going to love Logan. You two are going to agree on a lot. And I think I know where I agree with you is that I'm not I don't buy any of this burn down the state. I don't buy anarchism. It's not for me. But I appreciate a lot of their ideas. I do like the idea of a smaller state. And I do like the idea of better responsibility within the state. And I like how Bitcoin can do that. So that really crystallized it for me. But I think if we work through that journey, like literally going it through from Bernie to Bitcoin, I think we might help some other people crystallize what the problems are and how Bitcoin can, because I don't want to burn things down. I want to make things better.
Yeah.
I don't want to say democracy is a terrible system and it should be replaced with something else. I think it can be the best system. I don't want to say great, the best system. And it's better than a lot of the other systems people are living under. So how do we fix that and make it better?
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely agree with that. And I think something that I think about a lot with respect to libertarians and Bitcoin and sort of the worldview that I think exists, the folks who kind of think that, oh, we need to burn down the state. There's actually I'm probably going to get torched for saying this maybe from both sides, but I actually think there's some similarities philosophically between some folks on the left and libertarians, in the sense that I think there's a streak of utopianism that kind of runs through both. And for example, if you were a Marxist on the left, and you believe that there's this natural kind of progression of history from feudalism to capitalism, and then of course naturally the workers get fed up and they rebel against unfair conditions, and then we get the worker state of socialism. And then eventually, though, it all culminates in this kind of, Edenic, perfect, state of communism, which is utopian. I mean, that's a utopian view that we get there, and I think it ignores a lot. It sounds wonderful in theory, and I think it's really alluring, but it obviously ignores a lot of variables. And I think for libertarians, though, I think there's, and some of the folks in Bitcoin who want to burn down the state and live in this kind of anarcho-capitalistic sort of state of nature thing. Or I guess maybe some of the folks who I think now kind of the version of that exists on the libertarian side of Bitcoin is, we're all going to live on our own farms, and, the world is going to be just one big sort of organic, farm, and we're all going to sort of live these bucolic lives,
voluntary interactions.
Yeah. And I think, I've seen a lot of stuff on that, and I think that's similarly utopian and similarly probably, I hesitate to use the word naive because it sounds so pejorative, but I do think it's similarly ignores a lot of other variables. And I think, so I guess I think that there's some resonance between sort of the left's vision of the future and the libertarian's vision of the future that just doesn't get talked about enough. Because I think some of the pitfalls of both are similar as well.
Yeah, I largely agree, and we will both get flamed for this.
Totally.
But what I've come to appreciate is that when I spend time with libertarians, I think they have people on the left, people on the right, all seem to have anyone who cares so much about the system that we live within, they all seem to have a strong moral compass. They just have different things that they care about. I think libertarians are ideologically right about a vast number of subjects. I think the practical application of their ideas is where I struggle with it. But that's why I wish there was, I've said this so many times on the show, I wish the libertarian parties were better politically, more successful politically, because I think they could deliver a number of the things that, especially things that you've talked about in here, that a bit more constraint on the state, a bit more responsibility in terms of fiscal planning, and so I like and I support, and I just hope we see. I just think a more libertarian influence on politics would be good.
Yeah, I agree, and I like your framing that you just saying. I think in theory and kind of ideologically there are some similarities between the left and libertarians, but like you said, it's the practical applications. I think there are problems with the practical applications from both sides, both from the left and from libertarians. So I like that, and I also think, I definitely agree that it would be useful in America. One of the biggest problems that we have, in my opinion, is, we're extraordinarily polarized politically. The two-party system, I think, is, to put it charitably, untenable and dysfunctional.
Did you see that recent chart that came out on the voting patterns over the years?
Where it just kind of all converges and it hardens basically on each side now. Yeah.
Check out, I think it was Breedlove who shared it. I could be wrong, Danny. Try and have a look for this chart. But I think it was going back for like the 60s and 70s. There was it was less partisan, and now it's just like two solid blocks. Yeah,
there was kind of a middle ground that you could walk, or at least there used to be. But now it's a total kind of sorting process where you're either on one side, you're on the other side, and it's like that for every single issue, which is why Bitcoin is so interesting in the way that it
was. It this?
Yeah. It's fascinating, but it's also scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying, and I think the incentive structure for politicians in the U.S. is just to kind of get reelected first and foremost, because we have no term limits. So I mean, there's nothing to constrain politicians from serving, decades at a time, which is why the average age of an American senator is 65 years old.
Well, it's to get elected and get paid.
Yeah, get elected, get paid, and then just stay elected. And then in order to do that, I mean, you just kind of have to score the right points with your political team, your tribe. And there's less of an incentive to actually get the solutions correct or to find the right answer, which is, I think sometimes when we, want to sort of pitch Bitcoin to either political party, I think there's sort of inherent within that the presupposition that, if we just educate them, they'll want to do the right thing based on their knowledge. And I'm not sure that I think that that's 100% correct, because I think the incentive system is so poor that I wouldn't be confident saying that, sure, if we educated every person in Congress in America about Bitcoin, that they would all, see the light and see this as, a solution to certain problems, and start advancing it and proposing and passing appropriate legislation.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one of your I think you quoted Ambrose Bierce. Have I pronounced that correctly?
You have.
And this is, I think, the problem with what you said is a strife of interests masquerading as a contest of principles.
Yes, I think that pretty much sums up American politics. Yeah.
It did give me hope, though, when Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand actually came together and put forward a bill, and that's the promise of Bitcoin, is to unite.
Yeah,
and that kind of gave me a bit of hope, because we don't have the polarization that you have here in the UK. I mean, we have intense debates in Parliament, but there are things that parties unite on. There wasn't a massive polarization around COVID. The shadow cabinet pretty much supported the government with their decisions. We don't need to debate whether it was right or wrong. I think we're way past that. But and they would challenge the government on their decision, but they largely supported. There is no difference on Ukraine. Both parties are kind of largely agreed, but will challenge on ideas and policy. We don't have that political division, and I've often wrestled with why don't we have it. I actually think it comes down to the media.
I really think that. Like, politicians go on media here, like they'll go on the BBC and they'll be really challenged on either side. And I don't think you have that as much in the US. Like, politicians stick to their, like, Republicans will go on Fox. Like, I don't think they sort of challenge each other nearly the same.
It feels like in the US it's more like sports and teams, and you support your team. And if you go on Fox, it's a platform.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, I mean, people will argue the political bent of the BBC or Sky News, but they're still fairly down the middle at times, and they will speak to both parties and they will challenge them. And I think that's why we don't have as much polarization.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point, Danny. And to that point, I saw a chart on Twitter the other day. It was about the reading level of the average American, and the comprehension level was of the average American. It was something around like a 6th or 7th grade reading level, which of course affects,
Wait, that's of the average American?
Yeah, it's the average American basically has, I mean, it was like a comprehension rate, like the ability to, I think the chart is from, I want to say Josh Wolf. I saw it retweeted by a different account, but basically just the point just being that I think the media is pretty well aware that, you're not, I mean, it's a pretty obvious point. You're not going to get the amount of clicks and eyeballs that are necessary to make money by writing nuanced, thoughtful, really sort of deeply researched, pieces on various issues and kind of working through them in a rigorous way. It's much more profitable, and it's going to just reach more viewers and sort of where they are in terms of comprehension ability to kind of just say inflammatory things. And
yeah,
I don't know if this is the thing that you were talking about, but it says here, yeah, reads at 7th, 8th grade level.
Oh yeah, it's a different chart, but yeah, similar.
Wow.
Which I think is really, really kind of scary.
There's a similar thing with the Sun. How the Sun, I mean, the Sun is an absolute shit rag tabloid here. Yeah. By the way, don't buy the Sun. But they have a reading age that they write for. I can't remember what it is.
Is that true? I've not heard that.
Yeah, they do. They have a set, like, and when you understand, it's maybe like 10 or 12-year-olds. Once you understand that and you read it, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's what the chart was kind of getting at that I was referring to, is that people write to that, like the media writes to that level.
Well, it's why recently I've gone kind of full circle on the BBC. So the BBC is challenging in that it's kind of state funded. Okay, but it isn't like a Russian state news channel.
I mean, it's funded by. It's not funded by the state.
It's coordinated by the state, funded by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
It's not controlled by the government, but there's obviously influence. When I first discovered Bitcoin, I came to think, well, fuck the BBC. It's state managed, state controlled, state coordinated, whatever you want. We want fiercely independent journalism, yada yada. But actually, one of the things I've come to realize is that because it is state controlled, it has a duty to try and give a fair representation of all parties. They also have this onerous complaints procedures where if it's felt that it's not being independent, they have to investigate. And yes, it has its inherent flaws, but it also is a different way of being able to have the news represented to you than, say, something which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, which really is at the whims of what his objectives are. I mean, I don't think there is a perfect model. I think the best model now are independent journalists who are independently financed, who haven't been audience captured.
Yeah.
That's to me the best. But if you want to talk about mainstream, I think that there are benefits to being able to look at the news through multiple lenses. I will get flamed for this, but you defend it.
I definitely defend it. And I'd actually push back that independent journalists, whatever you want to call them, are a stronger source of truth. I think that's probably not true.
No, they can. And what I mean is that is not always, but they can be. And
I think maybe to Danny's point, it might be a matter of you can have kind of the cream of the crop of that, like the folks that you were saying, Pete. But there's also, because the barrier of entry for doing that is also so low that anybody can kind of just hop onto a Substack and do it, that exactly. you actually have an ocean of noise around these very these very strong voices that are I guess signal, but just the amount of noise that is present then is perhaps even greater.
Mm-hmm. And it's not that the BBC are flawless; they're certainly not. But I think there's some really good journalists and some really good work by a lot of organisations, not just the BBC.
Yeah, and there's some I'm a huge fan of John Simpson. I'm pretty sure he's head of news at the BBC. I wrote to him when I was a 7-year-old, and he wrote back to me. So I've always been a fan. But I'm a huge fan of his as a journalist and as a historical war reporter. I think he's one of the best. But then the BBC historically has some great reporters. It does have it does have to play to the crowd, the latest cultural, what is culturally acceptable. It definitely is a little bit more left than right. I think you would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not far off being one of the most centrist outlets, but it probably does lean a little bit left. Yeah.
Slightly left of center. I'd wonder what the bias check websites would say about it. I'd say it's kind of left of center, but equally to the other side, you've got Sky News, which is kind of right of center. And Sky News as a Murdoch-owned entity is less propaganda promoting than, say, Fox News. So I think you can get a good balance between the two of those, as long as you've got a lot of common sense with avoiding their bullshit.
That's where they put it.
Yeah, so just left to center.
Yeah.
What does it say for Sky News?
Who fact checks these?
Who fact checkers? Who fact check the fact checkers? Yeah, so we're just looking at media bias fact check, and it's got BBC just left. Huh?
Interesting.
GB News must be the balance. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what in America would be considered only slightly left of center or only slightly right of center.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to look up Fox News now.
Because...
Yeah, look at that. And then...
so for anyone listening, Fox News is considered right almost to extreme.
Yeah, so the chart is least biased right center right extreme, or least biased left center left extreme, and it's right of right, so it's approaching extreme right. Factual reporting, it's stated as mixed. Actually, have a look at CNN, to be fair. I actually think these websites are pretty good.
I mean, it just gives you a bit of a lens. Yeah,
again, it's pretty much as CNN is also mixed on factual reporting.
It's a mirror image just to the left.
Guardian's definitely left.
Yeah, but that's very left. Yeah,
yeah.
That would be probably our most left wing outlet. Do you think in the UK?
Yeah, probably. And it still has some good reporting, but you have to
some terrible reporting on Bitcoin. Though.
Well, yeah, but it has some good reporting. But so what you notice there is somebody who travels back and forth between the US and the UK is I see this extreme polarization, and then you have these extreme biases in the news. And I find coming back here, we don't have this extreme polarization. The debate is a lot more civil, and I think people are a lot more willing to give up on certain ideas or concede. And I think our news is a lot more balanced. And I don't know how you solve that. I don't know. I mean, bring back the fairness doctrine or...
Yeah, I don't know. I think the media question is really thorny. I'm not sure I have any good solutions to that problem. I think just from the political angle, I mean, to me, an obvious thing that would help would just be introduce term limits.
Yeah.
I think that's a glaringly obvious. I don't think it solves everything. I don't think it's kind of a magic cure or a panacea or anything. But I do think anything that we can do to kind of reorient the incentive structure would be helpful. And I think term limits would certainly do some significant cleanup of some of the incentives that currently exist.
Is there any appetite for that?
There actually is. Interestingly enough, I think. Maybe we could check this, but I'm pretty sure that both AOC and Ted Cruz, interestingly enough, I think they both agree on that. I want to say I kind of vaguely recall a tweet from Ted Cruz that was a quote tweet of AOC in which he said, I actually agree with you on this. Let's do something about it. I could be wrong, but I do think there's some appetite for it. Obviously not significant enough that we've had any meaningful traction on it thus far.
I think that one and the just a completely separate point, but the not allowing people in Congress to be trading in the stock market, I think that's another one that
also seems obvious. Yeah.